Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to another round of garage gossip. Now, there has been a lot of speculation about the future of Valtteri Bottas pretty much really since he signed his contract extension with Mercedes last year, at least that's how it feels. And over the German Grand Prix weekend, there were a few interesting, developments, or actually probably more specifically a few interesting comments from Toto Wolff. First of all, prior to the weekend getting underway at Hockenheim, Toto said that the team would not make a decision on Bottas' future until August, stating it is unusual to announce drivers in July despite Merck announcing both their drivers for this season last July, but anyway. He also added that he wanted Valtteri to put in solid performances in Germany and Hungary before taking some time over the summer break to make a decision, and I feel like this next line is very interesting, but they'll be taking a decision about their driver lineup for 2020 and beyond, with Wolff adding, quote, "It is not only about making the right decision for next year, but for further ahead." He did, by the way, add that just because they make a decision in August, it doesn't mean they will announce anything at the same time. Reading those quotes from Toto sort of says to me that they are seriously considering other options for next season, but more importantly, they are certainly looking at the long term, perhaps beginning to prepare for life post Lewis Hamilton. That's a bit further up the road yet though, so let's get back to Bottas' future. What is weird is that if I'd have been in Toto Wolff's position last December, I probably would have considered replacing Bottas then, and no, not necessarily with Esteban Ocon, but bad luck and team orders aside, he hadn't really been fantastic last year. Look, I don't want to bang on about last year too much because there are a lot of people who already have it in their heads that because I'm critical of an underperforming driver, that means I must absolutely hate them, which is complete and total nonsense. But I have to reiterate a point I've made a number of times this season when asked about Bottas. Yes, he was unlucky during those first few races of last season. Yes, team orders were issued at times. However, that makes up for about 7, maybe 8 races maximum if I'm being generous for last year. So what about the other 2/3 of the season? What about the last 4 races where he finished 5th place? All but one of which he was at least 20 seconds off his teammate. The fact that post-summer break he only picked up 3 podiums versus Hamilton's 8. I'm not bashing him before anybody starts that rubbish. I'm just explaining why I would have considered dropping him at the end of 2018 regardless of his new contract. Ultimately, what people seem to be forgetting is he finished 161 points off his teammate and 5th in the championship. Not all of that is down to bad luck and team orders. However, if I were in Toto's position right now, there is no way I would look to replace Valtteri Bottas unless somebody like a Max Verstappen became available. But assuming he doesn't, which I don't think he will, but more on that later, I would keep Valtteri hands down. He has been far better this season than he was even last year. And he has, if we just take into consideration the numbers, been a hell of a lot more consistent. 2 wins from the opening 5 races, including a run of 3 consecutive pole positions, on the podium at each of the first 6 races. His worst finish so far has been 4th, and his only retirement came last time out in Germany. Don't get me wrong, there are still some pretty hefty gaps to his teammate at times, and that does include some qualifying performances as well. But I really do feel like he's improved, and not just in terms of results, also in terms of the way he's driving. He seems more comfortable, and there have been times where he looks more punchy, more willing to get his elbows out. Not that we've seen too much of that from either Merc this season so far, given their dominance. The point is, when he's had to, he's fought. At the end of the day, though, he is doing exactly what Mercedes need him to do, picking up the points and helping them cruise to another Constructors' title. I don't mean this next line as a dig, but he's doing just what a number 2 driver should be doing, and he is the number 2 driver at Mercedes. So I just don't see why Merc really needs to change anything. He's doing the job he needs to do, the job he was employed by the team to do. On his crash in Germany super quickly, no, it doesn't bode well for him if he is being assessed based on his performances over the final 2 races before the summer break. But it would be a bit harsh to come down on him too hard for that crash, in my opinion anyway. His teammate crashed earlier in the race, yes, kept going, but he still hit the wall. We also saw plenty of other drivers making mistakes too. What I'm getting at is that the conditions in Germany gave us a lottery of a race, and so judging a driver solely based on that would be, again, very harsh. But he needs to perform in Hungary at the weekend. Big pressure on him there, and it certainly needs to go better than it did 12 months ago. Let's say, though, that they do decide to look at the bigger picture and replace Bottas with an eye on the future. Who do they bring in? Hey, it's that name again, Esteban Ocon. He does seem to be the top candidate if you listen to the rumour mill. Frankly, though, I don't see why. Look, Ocon is a much better driver than some will give him credit for, but he is nowhere near as good as some say he is. So, for example, he is better than a number of those drivers in the midfield, but he is nowhere near the level of the likes of Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen as 2 examples. I'd probably even say personally that I would, without jinxing them too much with this line, rate Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris far higher than I'd rate Ocon. I like the guy, don't get me wrong, and I think he's got bags of potential, but he doesn't scream future world champion to me. And if Mercedes are thinking long term, then that's the type of driver they need to be looking at, a future potential world champion. I don't think Ocon's that. Oh, and whilst I'm at it, I'll make a comment here rather than replying with the same copy and paste answer in the comments. I'll try not to get too ranty with it. No, Esteban did not beat Sergio Perez in 2017 or 2018, as some people love to point out every single time his name comes up. However, he was still pretty new to F1 in 2017 and was never going to beat Checo. He wasn't expected to, but he was only 13 points behind his far more experienced teammate and actually had one more points finish. And in 2018, he once again finished 13 points behind, but had 6 non-finishes versus Perez's 2. And of his 6 non-finishes, only one was marginally, in my view, his fault, and that was the one in Baku with Raikkonen. The others were either mechanical, including a disqualification, or him being punted out by other drivers, including, on one occasion, his teammate. Again. I'm not saying, by the way, that he would have beaten Perez without all of that, but he would have been a hell of a lot closer. The point I'm making is that you need to look at the bigger picture sometimes, especially in that midfield. Oh, and whilst I'm at it, Ocon wasn't, as some keep posting on social media anyway, he wasn't ramming into Perez constantly in 2017 and 2018. As I remember it, and as most people will also remember it, it was the other way round for the most part. Not that he was completely innocent, by the way, but Perez was at fault for far more of their incidents than Ocon was. Anyway, back to the point now that that's off my chest, no, I would not put Ocon in that car over 2019 Bottas. I suppose also, as I'm sure many of you will be thinking, why rock the boat? Hamilton and Bottas work very well together and are doing a very good job for Mercedes. They're doing the job they need to, as I've already said. Is Ocon really going to want to come in and play second fiddle? Will that lineup be as harmonious as Hamilton and Bottas is? I'm not so sure. I just think that it would be a very risky call putting him in the car next season. Maybe a year at Racing Point and then reassess for 2021. But for me, not for 2020. Fernando Alonso is another name I've seen mentioned, of course. But I just cannot see that happening. For one, he keeps saying his future isn't in Formula 1, and I can't see Mercedes reuniting him with Hamilton. It would be exciting for us neutrals, but surely far too explosive for Mercedes. I've seen Pascal Wehrlein also crop up in comment sections and whatnot over the last few weeks, but he's a Ferrari man now, and it is far more likely that we will see him in something like a Haas. I'm not saying he will end up with either Magnussen or Grosjean's seat. I'm just saying a move to Haas is more likely than a move back to Mercedes. Plus, if Toto was that keen on him, he wouldn't have released him. As ever, the recurring theme of Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez have cropped up as possibilities from some people. But if we take Toto at face value, the team are looking to the future, and quite frankly, neither of those drivers are the future. Checo is 29 and Hülkenberg is 31. Don't get me wrong, that is not old. I bloody wish I was still 29. But neither are options for the long term. Daniel Ricciardo is another one, but he probably now falls into a similar category as Hülkenberg and Perez. In fact, at 30 years old, he falls smack bang in the middle. On Ricciardo, I just can't help but feel that if Merck were that keen on him, they would have snapped him up last year. George Russell is another possibility, of course, a Mercedes young driver, but I'm really not sure on that one at all. He has been consistently quicker than his teammate, although somewhat ironically, he may well end up being outscored by him this year. And if we believe what Williams are saying, the data shows he is performing very well. However, he is only 11 races into his F1 career at the moment, and moving up to Mercedes so quickly would be a huge gamble. Yeah, absolutely, Ferrari did it with Charles Leclerc, but for the most part, George has only been scrapping with his teammate this season, and we haven't been able to see much, if anything, of his racecraft so far when it comes to wheel-to-wheel racing with others. I hope you understand what I'm trying to get at there. Also, do Mercedes really want an all-British lineup? I mean, it worked for McLaren commercially with Hamilton and Button, but they are a British team. I suppose nationality doesn't really matter all that much. They will just want the best 2 drivers they can get their hands on in those seats. But I'd imagine it will be a consideration on some level. The only reason I won't write off Russell to Mercedes for 2020 completely is that whole looking to the future thing. And also, I think George would be far more compliant when it comes to being a number 2 driver than many of the other options available. I just can't see it. It just feels far too early for him in my view. And by the way, I should mention actually that Claire Williams has said that George is with them for the next 3 years. But that reminds me, I know that there are drivers I mentioned in these videos and on live streams that have contracts for 2020, but just because a driver has a contract, it does not mean that they will stay at a team. Many have get-out clauses and the like, and so can move on if they want to. Also, it's my go-to example, and probably a quite extreme example, but Nico Rosberg signed a new 2-year deal with Mercedes in 2016 and retired at the end of that year. There is one other name that has cropped up over the weekend and has been doing the rounds actually over the last few weeks, and that is Max Verstappen. There is a lot of talk about a performance clause in his Red Bull contract that would allow him to move on at the end of the season should the team not be, well, performing, obviously, to the level he was, I guess, promised. However, I'd first of all argue that the team are doing more than enough at the moment to keep Max happy. He fits the bill at Mercedes though, a young driver with bags of talent, speed, and as this season and the second half of last season has shown, he's now nailed that consistency. I mean, Toto did play down the rumour around the Austrian Grand Prix, but they always tend to, and you can never say never in Formula 1. If Mercedes want him, they've got more than enough resources to go and get him. I suppose, though, you'd have to look at a Hamilton-Verstappen lineup in the same way as if they went to get Alonso, for example. Would they want that kind of potentially explosive partnership? And quite frankly, there is no way Max will leave a team that is very much focused around him to move to a team where he may well be expected to play second fiddle initially. So, although I really doubt Max will move to Mercedes for 2020, I do fully expect that he will be top of the list to replace Hamilton when he retires or leaves. I guess then, in some respects, Mercedes are limited in terms of their options. I mean, they are just some of the drivers that I thought of, but if you've got any other suggestions, then do feel free to put them in the comment section. But in the end, being limited for options could be what saves Valtteri Bottas from the job. However, saying that that could be the reason he keeps his seat seems a bit harsh. As I've already said, no 2018 wasn't great, but he has been far better this season, and in all honesty, I think he's earned another season with the Silver Arrows, and based on the options available for 2020, I really do genuinely think he is the right and best choice for Mercedes next season. However, as I always say, this is F1 and things are never that straightforward. That is it for this video then, and as always, they were just a few of my thoughts on the rumour, but what are yours? In the top right of this video, there is another poll where you can have your say. Do you think Mercedes will replace Bottas for 2020? And of course, you can also let me know your thoughts on it all down in the comment section. Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can follow me over on social media, and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.